So this is our first video for Hatshepsut, who is an ancient personality that we're studying for the HSC for ancient history. She's an Egyptian queen who goes on to become an Egyptian king, which is very interesting in its own right. But to understand Hatshepsut, we need to really understand Egyptian geography a little bit better. And there are some key terms that we need to know because those concepts really influence other aspects of Egyptian society, like their politics and their religion. So we'll get ahead with it and we'll do this nice and quickly. This is North Africa, and we can see Egypt is located to the northeast, or the northeastern part of the continent of Africa. And this yellow and brown and red sort of area in the middle here is the Sahara Desert. And we can see a little slither of green over on the right hand side there where that arrow is pointing, and that's pointing to the Nile River, which is really what gave Egypt its lifeblood. It was so important to Egypt's survival and the reason why it did survive for so many millennia. We're zooming in a little bit closer now, and we can see that green fertile land there on either side of the bank of the Nile River, and we can see that it empties out to the north. So this is a river that runs from the south to the north, and it empties out in the Mediterranean Sea there. And that part at the top there is actually called a delta. A delta is where a major river breaks off into little smaller rivers as it empties out to the sea, and we can see how lush and fertile that soil is at that point there. And that brings us to the next point, because the Egyptians relied so heavily on agriculture that was produced from the Nile River, from the fertile strip on either side of the river, that they came to term the two different lands of Egypt. The red land was the desert land, that refers to the colour obviously of the sand, which symbolised the ancient Egyptians' chaos and disorder because nothing grew there, and it was, people couldn't invade across it because it was too hard to traverse often, and wasn't life-sustaining and all those sorts of things. Whereas the land that the small strip on either side of the Nile River, which was life-sustaining, was called the black land, which referred to the colour of the soil, which was really rich and dense and full of nutrients. Because what would happen is the snows would melt far down to the south in Africa on tops of the mountains, and that would bring with it all these beautiful nutrients that would be deposited on either side of the Nile River every year. And so the black land symbolised order and stability and structure and all those sorts of things for the Egyptians. We can kind of see that just here in this image. It's obviously a modern image of the Nile, but we can see how fertile it is on either side of the Nile, and then just beyond that we can see just how stark the contrast is, because it is just complete desert on either side of that little fertile strip. So the Egyptians really relied on the river for their survival, because it was really important for agriculture. And I'll just move my head out of the way here for a moment, and we can see that term there, the annual inundation, which just is a fancy word for flooding. So once a year the Nile would flood. As I said before, the snows would melt and a lot of water would come down or come to the north, from south to north, and in the end the banks of the Nile would overflow, and on either side of the Nile it would flood, and it would leave with it a whole heap of really fertile soil, really nutrient-rich soil on either side of the banks, which was perfect for agriculture. And then the Egyptians could dig irrigation channels, kind of like what you can see in this image here, and farm the land and produce a really high yield of crops, which is what you can see in this image down here. You can see this is a tomb painting with an Egyptian ploughing a field, and you can see a woman coming behind him and sowing those seeds. Another term we need to learn is a term called cataracts, or cataract is the singular, and there are a number of these cataracts along the Nile River, and it's probably hard to see in that image there, but it just means whitewater rapids, which made it very hard to traverse the Nile. In fact, to take a ship across those whitewater rapids or those cataracts, you had to often get out of the ship and drag it using ropes from either side of the river, because they were just too hard to navigate. This is an image of the 6th cataract, but in the time period that we're looking at, the cataracts, the Egyptian sort of empire in the New Kingdom, in the time period where we're looking at it, it pretty much ended at the 1st cataract, because it was too hard to maintain any kind of power or control beyond that, because you couldn't traverse that easily in a ship, which just meant that it was just too hard to get a number of ships across there and control that area effectively. So we can see another little map here, and we can see the 1st cataract there at a place called Aswan, which is now where the Aswan Dam is. It's been there for almost 100 years, and that is what now stops the annual inundation or the annual flooding of the Nile. It no longer occurs as a result of that dam. And we can see here that the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and further down is the sixth cataract. So they tend to be much further down the river, and we're really only thinking about that first cataract because it's the most important one for these Egyptians that we're studying in this time period. A couple more quick terms to learn. The first is Lower Egypt, which is the term we use to describe the Egypt of the north, which is a little bit contradictory, but that's the term we use. So to the north is called Lower Egypt, and to the south is called Upper Egypt. And in the time period where we're studying the kings who come from Upper Egypt, from a place called Thebes, these Theban kings, and we can see that they eventually expel an invading force called the Hyksos from Egypt, and they unite Upper and Lower Egypt, which is what starts the New Kingdom period proper, if that makes sense. Finally, the main thing we need to understand in regards to the importance of the Nile is, apart from agriculture, is that it provided opportunities for trade, transportation, communication, and military control as well. So the geography of the Nile is very important for the Egyptians, and it gives us a bit of a basis to help understand their society, their societal structures, politics a little bit later on. Some of these things will become more clear, and religion.